Live.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, I think we're fine.
All right.
Mine says waiting.
Oh, geez, again. Okay. It says live, so let's just take it for that. Sorry about, again, for the delay in the start. Technical difficulties on my end. We just did roll call, and we are going to do the Pledge of Allegiance next. So please stand for the pledge. Sorry about, again, for the delay in the start. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to
the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
On to the next item, which is the approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion? Dr. Marshall, any changes?
None.
All right, could I have a motion, please?
Motion to accept the agenda.
A second.
We got a motion by Marlene Smith, seconded by Mr. Martinez, to accept the agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Opposed? And it is carried. All right, members of the public may request an item be placed on the agenda of a regular meeting by submitting the request in writing with all the supporting documents to the superintendent at least 2 weeks prior to any regularly scheduled board meeting. Individuals that wish to have comments on any item that is not on the agenda, that deadline to submit your comments has passed. It was 3 o'clock this afternoon, submitted by emails. I received no emails for public comment. That information of how to submit it was on the agenda. So make sure if you want to do public comment, you look at the agenda. It's right in the big box on the top of the agenda. Also, that same thing happens with public comments for agenda items. I also did not receive any emails with public comments for any agenda items. So again, that information, if you wish to submit an item for agenda, you look at the agenda at the top box and explains how to do that. And the deadline to have those comments read tonight was tonight or this afternoon at 3 p.m. So we are past that deadline. We have no comments. Next item on the agenda is recognition, and unfortunately, we've had a whole change of venue and everything else of how we run our meetings, but we do have 2 representatives to the board who are students, one from Pacheco High School, one from Las Banas High School, and they did an absolutely wonderful job this year of presenting their reports to the board when we were having meetings physically together, but now what we're going to do with them, and now that we're doing virtually, plus they really don't have a whole lot to report at their schools because there's not a whole lot going on because it's basically virtual learning. So when they were doing their job, they did an absolute wonderful job. We had Elizabeth Espinoza from Pacheco High School and Elizabeth Koo from Las Banas High School. Both girls did an absolute wonderful job, and we have mailed to them their nameplates because it's always kind of cool to have. And we also are going to send them a little recognition gift. That one of them is a senior. Elizabeth Espinoza from Pacheco is a senior, so I'm sure she can use a little Amazon gift card for some expenses at college. Hopefully she buys something fun like a sweatshirt or something instead of paying, buying a book, but hey, whatever she wants. And Elizabeth Koo is going to be a senior next year, and hopefully it'll be a great senior year and they're going to be able to do the senior things that they want to, and she can maybe pay for that yearbook or the cap and gown or the trip to Disneyland or something. So hopefully they will be able to put these things to some good use. So congratulations to them, and thank them again for all that they have done for us as board members. On to reports. First item is the Los Banos Teachers Association report. And let me pull that up here. And I will read this. This is from Los Banos Teachers Association. We are in unprecedented times. The world as we knew it a few months ago is no longer the same. Gone are the days when we could let our kindergartners give us a side hug, when our middle schoolers could get a high five, or we met with our sports teams on the fields. We now only see our students on a screen or hear their voices over the phone. We hope that when we hear our students' voices, we can intuit their needs, because we know we often can no longer see them, to help us decipher how to best support them. As teachers, we all long for the day when we can be back into our classrooms with our students. We all long for normalcy, but we all realize it probably isn't going to be normal anytime soon. With that in mind, we need to figure out the best way to move forward to keep all of our students and staff safe while remaining fiscally solvent. But there is no need to run around like Chicken Little. Together, we can keep the sky from falling. The LBTA and LBUSD bargaining teams met this afternoon to continue negotiations for the current 2019-2020 school year. Both bargaining teams have acknowledged the upcoming fiscal challenges brought on by COVID-19 and looming budgetary shortfalls. We now need to think differently about our budget. Like other districts in California, LBUSD will need to plan to spend budgetary reserves and carry over monies. This is a national emergency. These reserves that have been built up in case of a crisis exist to buffer the district from excessive cuts during an emergency of this magnitude. Together, we will be able to prioritize funding for high quality, appropriate, and safe educational programs for our students. To face these tough times, we must also remember that school districts have the option to borrow money at very low interest. With all of the uncertainty and challenges ahead, one thing remains absolutely clear. As we proceed, we must prioritize the safety of our students and staff. Today, LBTA presented a comprehensive bargaining proposal which would lower class size limits for grades TK through 12 and curtail or eliminate costs to the district. LBTA also proposed appropriate caseload limits for special education and speech and language pathologists. Our proposal is designed to decrease ongoing personal costs for the district. Using data provided by the district and checked by LBTA, the association has proposed contract revisions that would result in reduced personnel spending, safe and appropriate learning environments for our students, and manageable workloads for our teachers. Going forward, we face potential cuts in spending and staffing. Together, we must work to keep those cuts from adversely impacting daily education. All cuts, and we know there will be cuts, should be made as far from students as possible. This might mean repurposing our staff. Our first consideration must be safe and appropriate class sizes, a safe and appropriate educational space. It could be that some of our administrators also go back to the classroom to create these lower class sizes and safe spaces for our students. We must come together, not just to cut, but to create safe and effective class sizes and learning environments for the students of Los Banos. The steps we take now must ensure the quality of education and the level of safety we provide the children of Los Banos is exceptional. Now, what we do now will be our COVID-19 legacy. All right. Sorry about I'm reading these cold, so I don't, I haven't pre-read them, so I read them as they come, and so that's why I'm stumbling words there. Here we go. Next is the CSEA board report from the California School Employees Association. Good evening. I'm not sure if it's just me or if everyone can agree the 1920 school year has been one for the history books. I have been in the district for 24 years, and this has been the most difficult year by far. Since the closures of our schools on March 19th, CSEA has been working diligently with the district to make sure our members were not only safe and healthy, but to make sure the day-to-day operations of the district are being met. Although it's no secret, I think Los Banos Unified has the best classified staff ever. I have a couple classifications that I would like to mention tonight. Our custodians who cleaned and sanitized all classrooms, offices, and buildings of Los Banos Unified, and the technology staff who cleaned and prepared all student devices to make sure they had the capabilities of utilizing distant learning while at home. Our secretarial staff and our accounting staff working to close the books on this year, preparing for the new year. Lastly, our nutritional staff who have been hard at work since March 19th when we shut down our schools. Without any interruption of service, they continue to serve breakfast and lunch to the students of this community. We are averaging 8,000 meals, breakfast and lunch combined, a day. Their totals for the month of April were 151,348 meals total. That's a lot of brown bags. As we near the end of Teacher Appreciation Week, CSEA would like to salute all our awesome teachers in the district. Next week is Classified Employee Week. We will be celebrating the 529 classified employees whom support the smooth operation of our offices, provide safety and maintenance of our building and property, provide safe transportation, healthy nutrition, and direct instruction to the students of Los Banos Unified School District. Classified employees, with their diverse talents and true dedication, help nurture students throughout their school years. Chapter 92 believes the education of our youth is essential to the future of not only our community, but to the world. Csea Happenings. CSEA is in the middle of a golden handshake, year number 1. Members must notify Chris Aracho at the district office of intent to retire by July 1st, 2020. They must be prepared to retire within the retirement window of May 1st, 2020 and July 31st, 2020. All classified open positions will now be posted on Adjourn at adjourn.org. For more information, check your emails or call Chris Aracho at the district office. Until next time, stay healthy. Lisa, President of CSEA, Chapter 92. All right. Thank you very much. On to the next item, which is the Superintendent's Report. Mark?
Oh, sure. Thank you. First, tonight, we're very fortunate. We have Dr. Robert McIntyre. He's going to do our budget review, the one we've been talking about for a few weeks. The May revise was released today. It is correct. There are going to be some lots of cuts. I'll kind of get into that later. It's kind of a rough draft of how it may impact us. On a more positive note, I had a chance to attend the senior drive-through activities at both high schools. Those went very well. The parents and the students were very appreciative. May is a staff appreciation month. I mean, you have teachers, classified staff, school nurses, they're the principal. There's lots of recognition during the month of May. And we want to say thank you to all of our great staffs that we have in our district. I had a good time. I didn't get a chance to go, but I saw the activity at Creekside Junior High School today as far as the drive-through staff appreciation. I thought it was a very nice gesture. Thank you for the feedback on our facility videos. We've been trying to keep our community engaged with all the videos and the progress of the work going on in the district. Just being accountable with your resources. Stay tuned for information on our graduation ceremonies and how that might look given this COVID-19 era. And then finally, also, as far as the opening of school for 2021, there'll have to be a lot of dialogue around that. So that's all I have. My report.
All right, thank you, Mark. On to the facilities report. I have here from Tom Worthy. Volta, San Luis High, and West Side projects are in the closeout stage, and once the paperwork is done, we will send it off to the DSA. Los Banos High School parking lot has been paved and striped. We are moving to MSE to start their parking lot next. Junior high school, we have completed 2 more roofs at that campus. Thank you, Tom Worthy. That is the facilities report. On to board members report. Mark, do you have anything?
No.
All right.
Everyone
Lewis?
stay safe.
Oh, stay safe. Okay, thank you. Lewis?
No, sir, I do not have a report.
All right, Ray?
In light of Teachers Appreciation Week, I just want to thank all the teachers, and not just the teachers, but you know, especially during this tough time, but stay encouraged. And again, we thank you for all your efforts and sacrifices, especially during this time. And it'll be great when we can get back to normalcy. And just wanted to thank you. That's all.
All right, thank you. Gary?
No, I do not have a report. Thank you.
All right, Anahi?
I just want to say thank you to all the teachers for Teachers Appreciation, and also the parents, because I know it's been tough trying to go on to class, Google Class, and all, making sure all the are in, making sure that the kids are understanding. So just I want to say thank you for the patience for all the parents and the teachers. We're in this together, and we're doing the best that we can. So thank you for everything.
Thank you. Marlene? Marlene, you're muted.
All right.
There you go.
As California is in the process of reopening California, I would just like to encourage everybody to protect their own airway. We have seen an uptick in cases in Los Banos in the last 4 days. So COVID-19 is not going away. I haven't seen this many since we've had the outbreak at our clinic, but we're seeing more cases in Los Banos, and protecting your airway is going to be really important. Keep a mask. Wear your mask, please. And to the teachers, congratulations for a wonderful year. It didn't end like we wanted it to end, but you're still making a huge impact in our kids' lives. So thank you very much for that. And everybody stay safe.
Thank you, Marlene. Just a couple things on my end. Again, I want to thank all the teachers. This is Teacher Appreciation Week. Yesterday was Teacher Appreciation Day, or Day of the Teacher. And normally on Day of the Teacher, there's staff barbecues and donuts and little gifts and lots of great things going on. And that didn't happen this year, but I want you to know that we were thinking about you all day long, and we know how important it is what you're doing now. I live with a teacher. I was a teacher, but luckily I retired before all this mess happened. But I live with a teacher, and let me tell you, distant learning is just as hard on teachers as it is on the kids. Lots of sleepless nights and lots of crazy stuff happening with the computer, and it's been a learning curve for everyone, teachers and students. And I know my wife calls her students because she misses them, so she wants to talk to them, but she will give them a call once in a while. And it's really hard on the staff. So I thank you for what you're doing, going through all of this, because it's kind of, everybody's thinking out of the box and doing some great things out there. So really appreciate what the teachers are doing, and again, thank you. Also, next week is Classified Employees Week, and as Lisa said, we have many unsung heroes who have been working and taking care of all of the cleaning that needs to be done, and of course our cafeteria workers who have been serving a lot of lunch and breakfasts as we see them in the parking lots at lunchtime, handing out those lunch bags. So thank them for everything, and of course all of the classified staff who are working and keeping this district going, because hey, the lawn needs to be mowed, and we got computer issues that need to be taken care of. We have kids wanting to register for next year, and I mean, we got a lot of things happening at all of the sites, at the district office and every site, at the bus barn, etc. So thank you, all of you, for what you are doing. And just kind of get back to the teacher thing. I saw two things posted that I want to share. One of them was a parent who posted on Facebook. Does anybody have the number of the subline? Get it? Okay. You guys kind of just sit there. Yes. The teacher, the parent wanted a sub for the day. Okay. And then the other one said, the other one I thought was interesting. And I hope this is not too inappropriate, but this parent posted, I'm throwing out the whole distant learning thing. We're going to do some learning of skills that are necessary to make it in life and to get a job later on. So I'm helping my kids working on their bartending skills. So parents are out there and enjoying their new role and sharing some of their frustrations in interesting ways. So thank you to all the parents who are acting as teachers, because we know that is a crazy, crazy job that you've just been handed. All right. With that, I would like to introduce our guest tonight, who will be presenting the first item on our agenda. Robert McIntyre is with School Services California, and he has a presentation for us. So welcome, Robert, or I should say Dr. McIntyre. Thank you for being here.
Robert's fine, thank you. It's an honor to be here. It's fun to watch this unfold as we all work through our new normal. I know in the beginning there was concern on getting this meeting started on time, and I don't think I've started a meeting on time since March 16th. So no harm, no foul there. I'm going to go ahead and share the presentation that I've prepared here shortly. But before I do that, I just wanted to start by saying, during this time when you've got staff working both remotely and locally, doing kind of a hybrid work style, gathering information for most districts has been rather difficult. And your staff has been amazing and very responsive, getting us information timely and responding to questions. As part of what I'm reporting to you tonight is the results of a comprehensive budget review. And in doing a comprehensive budget review, we not only have to look over a pile of documents about 1.5 feet, 2 feet high, but we also have to interview several staff members and verify certain assumptions and facts that feed into some larger calculations that take place. And I just want to commend your staff, both in your fiscal office and in the business office, and even in the instruction side, and Dr. Marshall, for being very, very responsive, because this is a rigorous process, mainly because of the independence of the document that we create. So with that, I'll go ahead and I'll share the slide deck. Can everybody see everything okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Great. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about the scope of work and methodology of the comprehensive budget review that we conducted. We're going to talk about the budget review results. We're going to talk about some comparative analysis data. We used some local districts that you compete for students and talent with, as well as similar districts in the state of California. And the reason we do that is now under the local control funding formula, we find ourselves next to neighbors who are funded quite differently than we are. And so not only do we want to show how you compare to your neighboring districts, but we want to show how you compare to similarly situated districts. So districts of similar size and similar unduplicated pupil percentage. So we're going to talk through those. And at the end, I'll be able to answer any questions. But board, this is your meeting. If you want to stop me anywhere through, please, by all means, feel free to do so. So first, jumping into the scope and methodology of the study. This is an independent analysis of the school district's finances. And so when we checked in with staff to confirm what we published in the report and what's in this PowerPoint presentation, it was merely to challenge any facts in the report, not to challenge any of our findings, because we don't rewrite our findings based on staff feedback. So I want to make that clear that these are school services findings and conclusions and recommendations. In doing so, we examined a lot of information. Some of the things we looked at is both your historical and projected enrollment and average daily attendance. We looked at the budget assumptions in the local control funding formula, going so far as to actually get these FICMAT LCFF calculator that your district used and examined every cell in the table to make sure that what they populated the table with matched what was actually happening in your district over the last 3 years up through the second interim. We also looked at state budget data assumptions for one-time sources, categorical funds, federal revenues, and local sources. We did a verification of the budget salary data because, as you know, the biggest expenditure line in your budget is salary and benefits, so we want to make sure that it's accurate. So we look at that over time as well. We also want to make sure that we look at the assumptions of different expenditures. And that seems like a no-brainer. You know, let's say we spent $1 million on books this year, we're going to spend $1 million on books next year. Well, that's not true. Not only that, certain things increase in price much faster than others. For example, utilities. We may hear that the average cost of inflation is maybe 3%, but for your utilities, it may be double or even triple that, depending on if you're a PG&E customer or not. But utilities always outpace inflation, usually by nearly double. Even if you're not a PG&E customer. And then, of course, we look at your fund balances and your sources of funds for solvency, and we examine cash flow to make sure you're going to have cash in the immediate period so you can actually cover payroll. Now, the main focus when we do this is, of course, the unrestricted general fund, because it is the primary source of fiscal solvency. And so you have lots of restricted dollars, like your bond funds and your facilities funds and the restricted side of the budget for routine restricted maintenance that have legally restricted purposes. So while you get money for them, you cannot just transfer that money around for any purpose. And so in the event that any of those programs spends more than they receive in revenue, the unrestricted general fund has to cover those shortfalls. So that's why we really focus on the unrestricted general fund. We also recognize that this is the discretion, that these funds are the most discretionary in use to be allocated by the board for any educational purpose. We also look at other funds that have a history, not only in Los Banos, but other districts in general, of potentially becoming the evil word encroachment. And we're going to use two different sets of words. And I know a lot of districts are really sensitive around that word. Special education by design is underfunded by the federal government, and it requires a contribution, meaning a known amount we're going to have to transfer over. It's underfunded on the face of it. But other funds, like your cafeteria fund, are designed to operate independently and within their own means and not designed to require contributions. Those would be what we call an encroachment. So we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. Now, for the purposes of reviewing the LCF calculator and the multi-year projections for your finances, we looked at the second interim report, which was approved by the board on March 12th, 2020. In order to accomplish this, like I said, your staff had to produce a lot of information. So we looked at current and prior year budgets. In fact, we gathered all of your budget materials from 2016 to current. We looked at all the assumptions that fed into your multi-year projections for each of those budget periods to say, if you believed an assumption was going to result in a certain financial outcome 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, did we test that? So if you said it again this year, it could be tested and validated. We also looked at your historical enrollment and ADA information, both your local records and the state records. We also looked at records supporting salary and benefit expenditures. So we looked at your collective bargaining agreements as well. As we went through our analysis, several questions were raised that were not necessarily obvious or apparent for facts in the within the documents themselves. They're not all self-sustaining because we don't always have an extensive written narrative with them. And so we conduct telephone interviews with staff to clarify any factual information we need. And so just to be clear, once again, this is school services report. The district only verifies or disagrees with facts, but not our conclusions or findings or recommendations. So first, let's look at, well, first, are there any questions before we dig into the next section?
I just have one on the last couple slides back on the encroachment area.
Yes.
Do we have, did you notice anything in our transportation that our transportation has encroachment into our general fund?
Well, transportation would be one of those areas that, because special ed is underfunded, your transportation is also underfunded, will by its very nature, and the fact that it even has an MOE, a maintenance of effort, will require a contribution. But I did not highlight that as an area of special focus as a result of this review.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions before we move on?
No.
Okay, great. Thank you. I can't see everybody while I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so let's dig into the budget review. We talked about the types of information we gathered, and first and foremost, we looked at your enrollment, because enrollment drives your average daily attendance. That's the proportion of the days that your students are sitting in their seat out of the school year. And we need to look at enrollment because it drives ADA, which also drives your staffing and the types of staffing you're going to need. And so as you can see, we have the historical enrollment from 1996 to last year. And with the exception of a couple of years right there in the middle, essentially from 2008-9 to 17-18, student enrollment increased pretty steadily and averaged about 2.6% per year over that period of time. And growing enrollment is a tremendous place to be, because the incremental cost of every new student is about 35% of the new revenue. And so when you're growing, it allows you to expand programs, it allows you to compensate staff well, it allows you to do things that you just can't maintain when you have stagnant or even declining enrollment. In an environment where we have cost escalators that outpace our COLA, stagnant enrollment is just about as bad as declining enrollment. And so historically, you've done very well with enrollment, but this year was the first year in a long time where we actually saw a flattening. Now, I know your original adopted budget at the beginning of the year included roughly 200 student growth, and that didn't materialize. And so one of the things we look at is your staff making the adjustments to enrollment to recognize your reality? And so here you see in this chart, you see the historical enrollment and ADA. You see the change in ADA, average daily attendance, from one year to the next. And remember, we're funded on ADA, not enrollment. And so if you look at that bottom, the ADA to enrollment percentage in the table, you see that your students are sitting in their seats roughly 98.6% of the, or 94.6% of the year. That is an amazing rate for a unified school district. You're doing a great job of getting your students in their seats. Your team in your child welfare and attendance office is doing a fabulous job. And so you're going to want to make sure that those don't fall off, because that is the amount you can control your revenue internally, is by making sure those students are showing up to the extent that you can motivate them to do so. Where most districts find themselves that are similarly situated to Los Banos, where they find themselves in a bad place, is they see this blip like we've seen in your district, where you were over 200, roughly 236 average year over year up, and then all of a sudden you went flat. What a lot of districts would do is they would say, great, we'll show ourselves flat for this year, but we're going to go back to the same growth in the future years. Well, that would have huge impact on your revenues, but it would also encourage you to spend money that is very likely not going to materialize in the out years. And that's where school districts find themselves in a real bad way when they fail to recognize that. And your team in your business and budget office have done a great job in actually recognizing the current reality. And they said, we don't know what we don't know. And so we're going to hold ADA flat in the budget period. So they adjusted the current year down to flat from last year for ADA. And the 2 out years, they said, we think we're going to grow 12 students a year in enrollment. So our ADA will increase 10 students a year. So from 200 to 20, which is a big swing, but it recognizes your reality. And of course, if more students do come next year, it's a lot easier to add revenue than it is to make cuts after you've already started the year. And so the approach the staff has taken is the most responsible. It's conservative without being punitive. And so this slide 9 gets essentially at what I was saying. Your staff is really, by using the flat enrollment in the future years or near flat, you mitigated the risk of overstating your future revenues. And you've also held your ADA, your enrollment to ADA ratio, meaning your attendance ratio, static across the years. So there's been no manipulation of the numbers to overstate your future revenue. And that's really important from a governance perspective, because this is the sort of things that sneaks up on you if it's not clearly identified in your budget documents. Digging in a little deeper, we have to look at what type of students you have. And now that we're funded under the local control funding formula, the LCFF, you receive additional funds for the proportion of your students that are either English language learners, foster youth, or eligible for free and reduced price meals, called unduplicated pupil percentage is how we refer to the group, meaning they can only be counted one time in those 3 categories. And 80.26% of your students over the last 3 years, so the prior 2 years and this year, fall into this category. So your 3-year average is 80.26%. And that's the number that's used to generate supplemental and concentration grant funds that you identify in your local control and accountability plan, your LCAP, as you go through that process each year. And that's important because those funds are supposed to be used to increase or improve services for the students who generate them. Continuing, so what does that mean for your LCFF revenue? The district's entitled under the LCFF to calculate it each year based on its ADA and unduplicated pupil count. And so here what we've got is we've got your LCFF revenues. This is from your unaudited actuals in 18-19. We have the amounts from your multi-year projection in your 19-20 second interim report. So we see that from last year to this year, you've gone up 3.6 million or 3.1%. Absent the information we learned from the governor and the state of California over the last week, but up to second interim, you'd expected your revenues to continue growing in 2021 by nearly 2% and 21-22 by 2.7%. Now, there was a question about transportation. Transportation and TIG are included as add-ons to the LCFF calculator, but they don't get COLA adjustments. And so when you look, say, why is my increase less than the COLA this year, which was 3.26%, it's because a small portion of the LCFF has add-ons that do not get the COLA. So the weighted average is a little below the stated COLA. So as I said, your district averaged 239 student enrollment growth over the prior 4 years. And so when you multiply that out over the current year, and we're about to add a new year on with the adoption budget, so plus 2 more years, we're looking at $16 million that fell out of your multi-year projections. So when you come back to do your adoption budget and you start talking to Dr. Marshall and the team tonight about some of the changes from the May revise and what that means for your next year's adopted budget, just recognize that your financial picture has changed dramatically from second interim to today. And we'll dig into that after we get through the data that included the analysis up through second interim. So after we look at revenues, we have to look at our number one expenditure item. And that we're school districts, we're a business, or I'm sorry, an entity of talented people cultivating and developing young future talented people. And so that's a very labor intensive endeavor. Los Banos is spending roughly 83.3% of the district's budget on salaries and benefits. That's for all staff and all class groups. So certificated, classified employee benefits. If we look at the chart on the right, we can see that roughly a little over 43% falls into certificated salaries, 13% in classified salaries. Then of course, employee benefits for all 3 groups, including management. Management, if they're classified, they're in the classified group. If they're certificated, they're in the certificated group. Then separately, the district is spending about 7% in services and other operating expenditures and about 8% in the books column. The books column obviously has a caveat that we're going to talk about, and I know it's been the source of recent conversation. And very often, I know from a governance perspective and even from a stakeholder perspective, we see that services and other operating costs. And the common thing we hear is, well, let's just cut all the consultants. It's important to recognize within the service and other operating costs, you also have all your things like utilities. That's the number 1 cost in there. Transportation is typically the number 2 cost in there. And then of course, your non-public school costs are also in there. Those are the top 3 expenditures in that area. And so there's not always, 3 or 4% that can be gobbled up out of that line item like people think. It's often closer to 8% or maybe even 0.5%. If you really start to get draconian, you can get a little deeper, but you still need, lights and air conditioning and water for the yard before your neighbors start getting real angry with you. And so if you're spending that 83.3% on labor, that leaves you 16.7% for all the other expenditures. Now within that labor column, that's just for this budget year. As we look forward, we have to recognize that step and column will take place, but over the summer for July 1. And those who are eligible will have a movement either in step or column or both, depending on what activities they've taken place over this year. We'll also see that there'll be an increase in other costs just due to cost of living adjustments. So the amount you'll spend in special education will increase, especially for outside services. Your contribution rates for retirement accounts will increase. And so with this in mind, your labor cost actually for the next 2 years, the out years, grows to 85.1% with all known inputs. Now, just one quick thing. We are used to the days back in revenue limits, those of us who have been around long enough, when labor cost was very often up to 87, 88, 89%, back when the economy got bad during the last recession. It's important to recognize that a significant portion of restricted money that used to be on the restricted side of the budget was transferred over to the unrestricted side during when the LCFF was created. And so we're spending the restricted money much the same way in the LCAP that we used to on the restricted side of the budget today. And that's partially what drives that percentage down from what we're used to in the days of old. One of the other types of analysis we do is the variance analysis. And this is actually, to me, probably one of the more important types of internal process analysis that we do. And actually your staff does some of this internally as well, because it's a best practice. What we do is we look at where we thought we were going to be at second interim, how we thought we were going to end the year, and we see how we actually ended the year with our unaudited actuals. And we examine the variance by major object cost code each year. And so here's an analysis where we looked at 17-18 and 18-19 in each area. So the top line, we've got certificated salaries. In 17-18 second interim, certificated salaries were projected to be for the whole year, $44.3 million. When the year ended, the district actually spent $43.6 million. So they were overstated at second interim by $650,000. The expense actually came in less at the end of the year. In 18-19, the same analysis, and we saw that the district understated at second interim the end of year expenses. And the reason this type of analysis is important is it allows district staff in the fiscal and budget office to dig in and say what created these variances and how can we change our process to really narrow these down and get the ratios to be as small as possible. Because obviously what the administration, what the board and all stakeholders want is transparency. They want to be able to count on the numbers. And as I look at these numbers, the variances are relatively small. We don't see, with the exception of the books and supplies, we don't see a 5 or 7 or 10% variance that occasionally happens. And also keep in mind, if you settled with any bargaining with either unit, either certificated or classified, between second interim and unaudited actuals, that's going to be a partial driver of those variances during that period. And that will impact the benefits category as well because of statutory costs. Now, one area that jumped out in our analysis, and as we look through several your most recent board meetings, was there was an issue around the way line item budgets were being handled and items were being held in the books and supplies category. And believe it or not, this is not unusual, the way this is done. I was CBO at 3 separate districts, and 2 of them, when I started there, did it this way. And I know that this has been a practice in Los Banos for more than 10 years. To do it this way. And what's happened is school site budgets and some of the education service department budget is just kind of held in a placeholder in the unrestricted books and supplies expenditure line. So it sits there until it's allocated elsewhere, whether it be on labor, materials and supplies, or even services in the 5,000s often, until that expense comes through and the adjustment's made. It's just sitting there inflating that number. And so one of the things we wanted to do was dig in and say, well, how much is it? What is it? Does the district even know what it is? And then we made some proposed changes to how the district can handle this in the future at the board's direction. If the board agrees, then they would instruct staff to change this process, because obviously you don't want to change a major process that's going to cause a swing in numbers unless it's done very publicly, very plain out in the open, and transparently, so that way it builds trust, not erodes it. And so when I asked staff to provide a breakdown of the monies that were in the site and department allocations this year and how much were in carryovers, I'm happy to say the fiscal staff was able to give me a report that showed by school, by program, which I then of course summarized in the chart you see here. And so, for example, we see there's a music program, some funds that were allocated for the secondary. You've got a pool program in secondary. You've got some mom monies and ed services. And then, of course, the biggest line item is the LCAP allocations. So you've got your school sites and ed services operating a very significant portion of your LCAP expenditures. And until those expenditures take place, they've been held in this line item. And then you've got lottery funds as well that have been placed here, the unrestricted lottery funds. And then you had prior year carryovers, both at elementary, secondary, and ed services. Now, one of the things in looking through this, I had a conversation with Dr. Marshall, was very often we take a great teacher or a great TOSA and we make them a principal, but the training they go through to get their administrative credential doesn't tell them truly how to operate a budget, how to handle carryovers, how to communicate out the choices that are being made locally within their school site plan. And so in looking at the prior year carryover, Dr. Marshall and I had a conversation around that and around the training that he could provide and direction he could provide principals to work on prior year carryover balances. Obviously, you want to make sure current year allocations match the school site plan, but when you've got carryovers, there needs to be very conscious decisions made about that. And the reason I say very conscious decisions is the district has a history of just giving the schools their carryover balance from year to year. So it can build up over time. And if they're building up to achieve a goal that helps serve students, great. But if they're building up because there's, I'm afraid they might take it away, well then, when the tough time comes, they might lose it. And by the way, tough times are here. So the board will have to make decisions with the superintendent on how carryovers will be handled. When times get bad, I always suggest a sweep because it's an instant infusion of one-time money. But obviously you have to honor the culture and the history of the district in how you approach that. So I don't want to be draconian in my recommendation, but what I do want to do is provide you some alternatives that will enhance transparency. So there's two ways that I would suggest you approach this. The first way is that rather than holding the funds in the 4,000 line item account on the unrestricted side of the budget, I would suggest you move them down to the assigned fund balance portion, sort of down into your fund balance in the assigned section, and that something a detailed version of this chart is included in your budget narrative. So the teachers, classified, parents, they can see how much is being allocated out to the school sites, but it doesn't overinflate an operating line that makes it feel like maybe that we're not really providing the analysis we should be internally, because the district is tracking the number. They're just holding the funds in a place that makes it look artificially inflated, or it makes it look like the funds can be used for other purpose. The other choice, which is a far harder sell because it requires a cultural shift, is to require every department and school site to say, I'm going to actually put my money in the accounts I believe I'm going to spend it in. So if I believe 25% is going to go in labor, I'm going to put 25% of it in labor. If I believe 50% is going to go in outside services or contracts, then I'm going to move it there. Now that's harder to achieve, and it requires both your sites and your departments to respond to the budget office in a very tight timeline for budget adoption, but it is the best practice approach. And in speaking with some of your fiscal staff and Dr. Marshall and Amir, it's my understanding is that that's the path that they plan to go. Did anybody want to jump in on that?
We will be, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good, okay. Yes, we will be talking about that in terms of moving forward. What's the best way to be transparent and kind of alleviate the confusion in that area? So,
Okay.
We'll go with the second recommendation.
Okay. Now, I know it's my understanding that this issue has been covered pretty in depth. There's been some discussion. Are there any other questions about the proposed approaches or the matter in general? Great. Okay. Okay. So one of the other things we look at is for shocks to the financial system, and very often shocks hit the contributions line. So the monies that you have to transfer from the unrestricted general fund to the restricted general fund. And so what sort of shocks do we often see? We see the special ed contribution number grow over time, and it tends to grow faster than the money we receive in COLA, because it's a very difficult thing to manage, especially in the state of California, where, no matter what you do, the law is not really on a school district side, or it's not very balanced in the state. And so recognizing that very often things like routine restricted maintenance, when you've got, for example, more air conditioners that break in a year than you planned for or that you funded, then that could be a shock to the restricted side of the budget. A large legal settlement or rapid increase in your special ed costs could also do that, as well as taking on additional outside debt that hits your general fund could be another way that you have shocks to the unrestricted side of the budget that have a financial impact on your solvency. And so one of the things we did was look at your growth in your contribution rate from 2015 until now. And the growth has averaged almost 16.9% a year, which means you would expect your cost to double every 4.3 years. And so one of the things that we want to make sure that what drove some of that. Now, special ed costs drove some of that. Also, the district received reimbursement for a construction project, which means the district, while it had some flexibility in routine restricted maintenance up through 1819, in 1819, the district had to bring its routine restricted maintenance contribution up from 2 back to 3%. And so that accounted for a significant portion of the increase in 1819. But when we look at the increases from 1617 to 1718 and even 1819 to 1920, they're substantial. And so we want to make sure that future projections recognize what we've seen in the past. And so when we looked at the multi-year projections, the contribution from the unrestricted side of the budget to the restricted contributions, for future years, the district is using 4% and 3% in the out years respectively. And so we want to make sure that, is somebody speaking? Okay. We want to make sure that that there's continued analysis as the year progresses, and there's a close examination of the drivers of the increases, because once you adopt your budget, if you have to ratchet up expenses as the year goes on, which is very often the case in special ed, especially with one-on-one aides or classroom aides, it's better if we can recognize that up front and kind of tear the Band-Aid off at the beginning of the year, because right now you're fortunate to have a very healthy fund balance. But over time, as the economy weakens, that your ability to sustain that's going to diminish, and you don't want your staff coming back to the well halfway through the year because they can't afford to meet the plan they set out. So that's just an area for the governance team, for the board to really focus in on as they look at their adopted budget in the coming year. One of the other things we look at is the other funds that could potentially encroach. And you might recall earlier on, I said the difference between a contribution and an encroachment is a contribution is planned for, an encroachment is to a fund that should be self-sustaining. And so you're operating several other funds, your normal funds like your deferred maintenance fund, you've got your building and construction and developer fees fund, and you've got your bond fund. And then of course your bond interest and redemption fund, which is managed by the county that you don't even touch. Your staff reports numbers from prior bond issuances and collections of payments through property taxes. But there are operational funds that could potentially encroach if they're not looked after just as vigorously as your general fund. And so in red, you see I've highlighted the Adult Education Fund, the Child Development Fund, and the Cafeteria Fund, because the three of these funds are actually poised to require substantial support starting next year. And so here what we have is the fund balance, or the operating results based on your second interim report. So it showed your beginning fund balance there for this year, your anticipated revenues, your expenditures that you've planned for each of the 3 years, your contributions as they were calculated in the out years. As I said, there's a little concern about a growth factor there, so you want staff to keep a close eye on that line item. And then I've added in if your adult education, child development, and cafeteria funds, if you make no changes from the operational results last year and this year into the future, this is the amount of help that they will require to pay all of their bills operationally for each of the funds. And so we see that your adult education fund has enough reserve this year, and same with your child development, to cover all of their expenses. But next year, they're going to run short. In fact, they've both spent down their fund balances this year, and without help or a change in operation, meaning added revenue or cutting expenses or a combination of both, they will require contributions in the out years. So adult education will require a little over $20,000, and child development will require about $100,000. Now, is this to say that some districts don't intentionally plan to supplement these outside programs? That is a choice some boards make, but the programs by their very nature are designed to be self-sustaining. So what does it mean if the district or the board makes a choice to sustain these programs with internal funds, meaning from the unrestricted general fund? It means that you're not able to recoup certain expenditures like indirect costs. So for example, your budget office, your business office pays the payroll for all of these funds. Well, there wouldn't be enough left over to cover the overhead costs for things like utilities, overhead costs like at the accounting office, and also things like other post-employment retirement benefits. So those costs are allocated across every FTE in the district. And if a certain number of FTEs can't collect overhead costs, then they can't collect their OPEB costs, and you're going to short fund those future retirement benefit costs. Now you'll notice I left off the cafeteria fund for last. And the reason I left it off for last is because it's substantial. The cafeteria fund deficit spent this year, $1,664,000. And so fortunately, the cafeteria fund has had a large fund balance that it's been spending down for multiple years. The thing is, the amount, it passed its spend down threshold 1.5 years ago. So if staff can't continue to claim that we're just spending down according to our plan, because you're allowed to have 4 months of revenue set aside in that fund. And so that fund should have stopped spending down roughly $1.2, $1.3 million. And so it continued to spend all of its fund balance this year and required an $80,000 contribution in the current year to meet all of its obligations. Now, some of those obligations are likely to actually increase a little bit because you're probably spending more money delivering meals than you did when they were being delivered at school, because you're going to have more transportation costs, and you're going to have more paper, good, and packaging costs because you're packing up multiple meals to hand out at one time. Your packaging and paper costs are substantially more. And I know that for the public, they don't realize this, but paper costs for a school district food service program are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's not cheap to serve food. And so you'll likely see this number increase, but you did get some COVID-19 funds that can be used to offset the additional increase in order to serve those meals. But looking forward, the encroachment is scheduled to be almost $1.7 million into the future. Now, this can be mitigated. This problem can be resolved internally. But what you're going to want to do as a governing team is make sure that you put the resources toward this to ensure that this doesn't come to life. Because you see, at second interim, you were planning on deficit spending about $4.5 million a year for each of the 3 years. You were knowingly going to spend down your fund balance, but maintain a positive budget certification. If you do nothing, immediately you have a qualified budget because you're below 3% in year 3. Now, of course, you're not going to not do anything. But we wanted you to be aware that this is one of those areas that can gobble up money that you didn't plan for and become a shock to the system. And so we wanted to make sure you knew it was serious. So we made the adjustments with those. If there were no changes made, what would it look like to your fund balance? And so here's what you see. You see what it does to your current year. You're going to end the year right where you thought you would at about 16.8 million in your fund balance. It's going to take an additional hit on the out year. So instead of having 12 million in year 2, you're going to have 10.7. And instead of having roughly 6 million in year 3, you're going to have 4.3 million. And that puts you into a qualified budget territory. And so I just want to make sure I highlight the seriousness that outside funds can get you if you're not paying attention. And so this is just a graphical representation showing that the revised data shows that there's a year 3 problem here. So next, we want to look at cash management. Now, when you're a district who's got a $16 million fund balance and you've got some money in some of your other funds like developer fees and deferred maintenance, you typically are not going to have a lot of cash flow issues in the year for a district your size. But it's important to recognize that we have a history of looking at cash flow over maybe a 12-month period for the current fiscal year. But with some of the shocks we see coming down from the state and the state budget, and now we're hearing the evil word deferrals, which, while better than a cut, has huge impact on our cash flow. We want to make sure that we have the cash available to cover during those deferrals in short periods, or that we know far enough in advance that you're in a position to pass your resolutions and participate in a tax revenue anticipation note or TRAN pool, so you can borrow cheap money for the time you need when the state doesn't meet its cash obligations and pay you on time. And so we're suggesting that you direct staff to extend their cash flow projections out 24 months when they do their adopted budget this year. But to be clear, you do not have a cash flow issue for the rest of this fiscal year, even with the deferral.
Robert, wasn't there some rumor going around that the state of California was going to be withholding the July and maybe the August payments?
So the state of California is definitely going to be withholding the June payment by about a week. And so normally, we receive our monies at the end of the month, which is why projecting out our cash flow is so important, because we're issuing paychecks around that same time, and some people get direct deposit. So a lot of payroll is funded 2 or 3 days before payday, depending on what credit union they use. And so recognizing those transfers out happen before the revenue comes in is crucial. And so if the June cash is delayed into July by a week, you need to have a fairly healthy fund balance to make sure you're able to cover all of that month's expenses. For this year, you're in good shape. The district has done an admirable job of building up revenues when the economy was good. However, the district has also, and every budget is the culmination of years and years of cumulative decisions. It's not just a snapshot of this year. So every decision about compensation, about benefits, about textbook adoption programs and timing, all has this grand impact on this puzzle that's always changing, because the state is always changing our inputs. But we know for sure that we know nearly perfectly that June is going to be postponed into July, but we're only talking about 7 to 10 days. You're fine for that. It's when the other deferrals are going to take place. And so we had the preliminary information at noon today that we spent, school services spent kind of putting out our quick hitting articles, and we're writing the in-depth ones tonight. But we won't know until probably tomorrow morning when the 2021 deferrals will be, which months are going to hit. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Ani had a question a bit ago. Did you? Ani?
Yes, I actually was looking at, slide 17, just to know how you were recommending the adult education, the expected contribution. If we hold back on adult education, the expected contribution, development and cafeteria fund, are those contracted, or is there a way? I mean, of course, in the future we're going to talk about it to see if we can hold back because of all those deficits that it was shown on 17. Are they contracted?
No, they're not. It's our own employees. We don't have any contract service. Adult ed is through the community college, and child development is our fund, and cafeteria is our own people.
Gotcha. Thank you, Mayor.
Great. So you're in a good position in the current year. And if you instruct staff to look out that additional year, you'll be prepared when the board has to make those resolutions. And of course, the more time you're able to give staff, the cheaper they're able to get access to money. And while it's a bummer to have to borrow money that's already owed to you, if you're going to do it, you want to do it as cheaply as possible. Now, it's my understanding your county also operates a TRAN pool, and that's typically one of the cheaper ways to go.
What's the interest on that kind of loan and such? Is it variable?
So we've seen interest rates during the last recession that were below 1%, but typically they're 1.5% for about 4 or 5 months.
Right. I think, Margaret, one of the requirements is you have to pay the loan back in the same fiscal year. Is that correct, Robert?
So there's 2 ways to do it. If you're less than 120 days from the end of the fiscal year, it can carry over to the next year. But if you're earlier in the fiscal year, then it has to be paid off within the same year.
Same year.
And actually, there'll be a lot of guidance around this in the May revise next week that you'll be attending. So this will be an area that your staff, and if the board attends, will be digging in quite deeply to. So the next phase of the analysis, so we looked at what is and what your staff has been doing, how they've handled the budget process, what some of the key indicators to look for are towards solvency. The next area we want to look at is some comparative data. And we start by looking at similar districts in your area. And so this is a list that has been used previously to compare for salary and compensation, or even different operational metrics, because they're local. And so very often you might be competing for talent or for students even with some of these districts in the area. And so you'll notice, because this is a local set of districts, The unduplicated pupil percentage ranges from 55.7% to 99.2%. And in this group, you find yourself right in the middle at roughly 80.69%. Also, the size of the school districts in this group varies widely, from the low 2000s to the upper mid 10,000s. And that's significant because what school districts can offer through centralized services varies widely based on their size. And so the larger a school district is, the better economies of scale they can get in centralized services. And when we think about centralized services, we may think of things like professional development or accounting, but you could also think of things like your custodian and maintenance crew, how much staff you're able to get out there and how they can synergize together. When you're a smaller district versus a larger district, it has a real impact. So this is the group of comparison districts locally that we looked at. And we're using 2018-19 state certified data. And the reason I point that out is invariably somebody will say the data you have there is wrong. And so let me be very clear. The data here is accurate. It's the data that was submitted and verified and validated by the state. And if things were to break down at the bargaining table and you were be unfortunate enough to find yourself at fact finding, this is exactly the data that the fact finder would take and look at. So with that, let's dig into some of the comparative metrics. Now, the published report, this section actually starts on. Dr. Marshall, is the published report now available?
Tomorrow.
Okay, so there'll be a published report available tomorrow, and these slides, yes, these slides start on page on page 20 of the report. And so each line item that you see in here is an entire chart within the report. So when we look, for example, the last page you saw was the unduplicated pupil percentage and the list of districts. You ranked 9 out of 15. We see that your district's value for unduplicated pupil percentage was 80.69. The highest district was 99.21. The average for the district group was 78.38. The low value was 55.69. And Los Banos was roughly 2.31% above the average for the group. So just to give you some comparison with that first chart we looked at to what we're going to do with the rest of the values in the charts. And the reason we do this is we could spend an hour and a half just going through the charts. But I'm happy to answer questions, and if there's a need to come back as people look at the charts later on, I'm happy to do that. But this is a nice reference document that compiles all the charts. And so when we look at comparative districts, we have to start by looking at revenue, because to act like revenue doesn't matter means that you're spending your money either on staffing or in other areas aspirationally. And so what does that mean? It means that if I act like I'm getting $12,000 a student when I'm not, well, eventually somebody else is going to come run the district, like the state. Or conversely, if I act like I get $8,000 a student and I'm getting $10,800, my staff is going to revolt, rightly so. And so we have to recognize that revenues drive a lot of the way we spend money, revenues and a lot of state laws. And so Los Banos, in a group of local districts, ranks 6 out of 15 with $10,818 per ADA. Now, in your comparison group, the highest district revenue per ADA, LCFF revenue, is $11,853. The median is $10,708, and the low value is $9,539. So Los Banos, while number 6 of 15 on the list, gets 1% more than the average for the group. Great. So how does Los Banos Unified spend its money? Well, Los Banos does spend on how it spends its money on salary and benefits, that 83.3%, those total dollars, ranks 4 out of 15, meaning proportionally spends more on staff and benefits than similar district on a per ADA basis, spending $8,258 per ADA. And that's 5.1% or $400 per ADA more than the average district in the comparison group. So clearly, the district over time and through the choices it's made, both in staffing ratios and in salary and benefits, health and welfare, has prioritized staffing very, very highly historically. And this is something that you build to over time. It's generally not the result of one choice made at one bargaining session. This is an evolution that brought you here to today through the end of last year on this data. And so you ranked 4 out of 15 in this category. But we really need to dig into that and say, what does that mean? What are the drivers? And so first we look at the unrestricted certificated non-management personnel. These are basically your classroom teachers. And in this metric, is somebody trying to talk? Okay. In this metric, the district ranks 7 out of 15, spending $3,968 and finds itself $12 over the average of the comparison group on a per student basis. So spending $12 per student more in this area, so on teacher expenses, than the average school district. This is just salary, not health and welfare.
Well,
When we look at the classified non-management salary expense, the district has definitely prioritized support services. And so we see the district is 4th out of 15, spending $1,251 per ADA on support services. Now, this isn't just your custodial or just your grounds or just your accounting. It includes things like instructional aides, your very important office staff at your school sites. These are all, all very important people to keep high quality instruction taking place in the classroom. Requires a lot of these support services around you. And so not unusual, but in this comparison group ranking 4 out of 15, or $100 or 8.9% more than the average for this group, comparison group. So then we looked at district administrators. Whenever the economy gets bad, and even sometimes when it's not, I personally have spent 8 years at the bargaining table as either number 1 or number 2 on the district side. And this is not an uncommon factor. Los Banos finds itself between site and district administrators ranking 14 out of 15, meaning it spends $491 per student on site and district administration. That includes all of your executive management team. And so you rank 20% below the average in this category, or $123 per student below the average for this category. Now, of course, that probably makes you very popular in negotiations, because, when they say great cut management, they're useless anyway. Fun thing to say at the bargaining table. It gets a lot of laughs. But the reality is everybody needs guidance. I know when I'm busy at work and I've got 20 things on my plate and 5 new initiatives, sometimes it's nice to have a boss that's present enough and has the capacity to answer me when I say, what are the top 3 things I should work on today? And if you scale back too far, that boss isn't going to be present to answer that question because they're running around with their hair on fire. So next, we want to look at employee benefits. And this is an area that the district has clearly prioritized highly. The district ranks number 1 of 15, spending $2,549 per student on benefits. And that's for all employee classes. So that's the average for everybody who receives them in the district. I'm sorry, for every student in the district. And you'll notice that you're right there at the top, and you're about 19.1% above the mean for the group, or $400 per student above the mean for the group. So we've seen 4 metrics where the district has prioritized staff, and because we're not a basic aid district where we receive $15,000 to $18,000 per student like the back east districts, despite being the 2nd most expensive labor market in the country, we're not funded very high on a per student basis nationally. And so because we can either pay our staff well or have a lot of staff, but we can't have both, you see the resulting impact of paying the staff well in those upper categories shows you 14 out of 15 in student enrollment per teacher. So Los Banos has an average students per teacher of 24.68. Which makes it the 2nd highest among the group. The low value is actually a good number here. So one district had 17.04 and the highest district had 27.1. But Los Banos is 24.7% above the mean in this category. Okay. So then we started saying, when we combine that health and welfare with those salaries, where do we place? And so here we have the computed average teacher salary combined with the average health and welfare benefit. And we see that Los Banos for teacher and health and welfare, so total compensation at the employee point of service, the district ranks 2 out of 15. The average cost of a teacher to the school district is $104,534. That is $11,218 above the mean, or roughly 12% above the mean of the group. The younger teacher coming in with a bachelor's degree and usually some extra units to get their credential, roughly 30 units on step 1, on salary and benefits, they rank 1 out of 15, and their average cost would be $76,738. Or not average cost, that would be their cost when you add that step on the salary schedule, step and column with their average health and welfare benefits. Then we would look at the mid-career teacher with a bachelor plus 60 units on step 10, so 10 years of service. And of course, teachers very often are working on their craft, so they're taking additional college units to become great at their craft. They'll have moved over columns and moved down steps. And so we see the average cost of salary and health and welfare benefits for that employee ranks 2 out of 15 at $101,883. That is almost 10.9% above the mean, or $10,000 above the mean for the group. Finally, looking at the top of the salary schedule, that teacher who's put in a long career. And by the way, none of these are facts. It's not meant to be a value judgment on good or bad. Nothing's to say, please don't take any of these as to say your teachers are underappreciated or overpaid. I'm saying how they rank within the context of a peer group. Obviously, if the state would fund us adequately, we would pay teachers more because they're worth more. Same with our classified and management. But because they don't, we're making the trade-off and we're having this conversation. When we look at the top tier teacher, Los Banos actually treats its end of career teachers very well, ranked number 1. The cost of that top step and column teacher with average health and welfare benefits is $130,444, which is over 14% or $16,000 above the mean. It's also $9,000 above the number 2 district in this ranking. So it's fairly substantial difference in this category. Not entirely unusual because we tend to have more senior teachers on the bargaining team. And of course, every teacher benefits if they're going to put in a long career from having a top end salary because it helps their retirement. But in this case, the values puts them at number 1. So the next thing we did is we said, great, we looked at how Los Banos placed against local school districts, but how do you place against school districts of similar size and similar unduplicated pupil percentage, meaning they're going to have similar economies of scale and they're going to have similar funding types. And so here's a list of comparative districts using the state certified data from 1819 for the same analysis. And so here we see that the district for unduplicated pupil percentage in this group was ranked number 6, but we see the variance from high to low is much smaller, roughly 70% to 86.7%. In this case, with the district ranking 6 out of 14, it was 2% above the mean. Although I see there's a cell error on the percent difference. So we'll look at that percent above below number for this one. Looking at the second line, looking at revenues, the district ranked 8 of 14 and was $61 below the mean. This is just for a peer group. And the reason this is important is because in your other comparison, you had districts up in the high 90s for UPP, and they're receiving a lot more per student. And so that tends to skew the analysis a bit on the revenue side, and which also skews the analysis on the benefit side, pay and benefit side typically. So typically, if you rank low on revenue, you would expect salaries and benefits to also rank low. And to the extent they don't, then you know you've got a district either saving a lot of money or burning down their fund balance in a hurry. That's how those data points come together. So looking at the revenue, you've got the same 10,818. You've got the high and low, and you're $61 below the median. The unrestricted personnel costs, once again, still ranked high. And so one of the things you're going to notice is even when you're examining against your peers, you're still ranked high in compensation. And so look at the unrestricted salary and benefits expense, you're still spending that $82.58, and you're 5% over the mean for this group, ranking 4 out of 14. Looking at the unrestricted certificated non-management teacher salaries, so salaries, not health and welfare benefits, 5 of 14 with the same numbers, and you're roughly 3.8% over the mean. The unrestricted classified staff, ranked 9 out of 14 in this one. So you see, when you put yourself near peer districts, you're actually below the mean, whereas when you were putting yourself near local districts, you were ranked number 4. So you see how there's different economies of scale and different choices at different sizes and what that means. Now, not unexpected, when you rank 14 out of 15 on site and district administration in one group, you're probably going to rank low in another. And so here we see that in peer group, a similar peer group, the district ranks second to last here as well, 23% below the average. And so this definitely raises questions of, is there adequate either programmatic or site supervision, or within other areas that require leadership? Do you feel like you're achieving the things you want through your leadership team, given its size proportionally to the rest of the team? Looking at employee benefits, we see the district, once again, in this group ranks 1, roughly almost, 19.7% or $419 above the mean per student. And then, of course, looking at enrollment in this group, the students per teacher, it actually has the worst ranking of the group here. So the highest number of students per teacher of this peer group. And it was second highest in the other local analysis. Looking at the computed average teacher salary plus health and welfare benefits, the numbers stay the same, but you notice compared to the peer group, for an average teacher, you're 18% above the mean, or $16,000 in total compensation costs. That's salary and health and welfare. And the reason we break this out, we show you salary, then we show you salary and health and welfare, is because very often what we find at the bargaining table is what I like to refer to as aspirational bargaining. Let's find the district around us that has the highest health and welfare benefits. Great, we want to match them. Let's find the district around us that has the highest salary. Great, we want to match them. And so that's aspirational. It doesn't take into account your revenues. And so, acting like revenue doesn't matter when we spend our money it would be an aspirational way to bargain or to run your finances. And of course, you as a bargaining team can't act aspirationally. And so we want to show you what those numbers look like individually. Looking at the total compensation for a new teacher, ranking 1 out of 14 again here, roughly $13,000 above the mean, or almost 22%. Looking at the total compensation for a mid-career teacher with 10 years and a BA plus 60 units of college, they ranked 1 out of 14 at almost 102,000, 16,000 above the mean, at 18.7%. And then finally, your top tier teacher, once again, the 130,444, almost 21,000 above the group mean, or 19% above the group mean. And so what this shows is that both with a local school districts and a similar set of school districts, the district has very much prioritized staff. And I know there's even one of the things I noted early on when you were reading the both association notes, they were both very positive and upbeat, very encouraging to talk about, safe and fiscally sound budget process, given the information coming out from the state and the governor over the last week, including today, acknowledging the change in financing, and even talking about using reserves, which, the district has been doing. It had a plan to spend down 62% of its reserves at second interim without the extra encroachment from the other programs and without the sky falling from a revenue perspective with the May revise that we just received today. Now, I had asked, I had suggested that the business office look at what the impact would be from the second interim change just on your LCFF revenue. So this isn't looking at like your mandated cost with no COLA or any of those changes that would impact your budget, but just the LCFF. And I don't know if Dr. Marshall or Amir want to talk to that.
Can you share my, I need to share my screen, can I? Let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we see it.
Okay. Well, basically, if you look, okay, we were talking about previously, there was a projected deficit spending at a little over $4 million. But after today, you look at the projected deficit of 7.69% added to that, and you see the numbers. Basically, if you add 7 million to 4 million, you can see the amounts. And that's basically if we don't do any, if we don't take any kind of action, obviously.
So if we make the assumption that you're going to make sure that your outside programs like food service and adult education and child development, you're going to fix those.
Right.
You're going to make sure they don't encroach.
Correct.
But if you make no changes from second interim, you will spend 100% of your fund balance next year.
Yep.
So you're teetering without making relatively dramatic concessions across your budget. You're 3 months away from having a negative budget certification, going from qualified to negative. Now, I know that sounds horrendous and it feels like the sky's falling. We felt the same way in 08, 09, especially when it came onto us mid-year. It was awful, and it's going to feel draconian to you and the staff, no matter how you look at it. I try not to be one of those people to overstate or be overly dramatic when it comes to budget difficulties, because I've had to cut $100 million out of a budget for a school district and myself. And I recognize the pain that the board and the staff and the community and students are all going to feel doing it. But if I leave you with nothing else today, it's when you re-engage your staff as a governance team, time is not on your side.
Thank you.
But you can do it.
Okay. Let me close this out. All right. I'm done.
Are there any questions on the presentation? Sorry, I know I was a bit long-winded, but I know you have a lot of stakeholders who are paying attention to every line item, and I want you all to hear the same thing.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It
Very
was
nice.
Mr. McIntyre.
definitely an eye opener. Wow, it's scary. Thank you very much for being here and presenting for us tonight. If nobody has any other questions, we will continue on with the agenda. A little shaky as we do that, but it's a little scary.
Yeah.
Dr. McIntyre, thank you so much. Really appreciate you doing that presentation. It was
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you. It's truly a pleasure. And I have to say that your Los Banos is the only district that school services actually responded to in person today because of the May revise. And we value you as an education partner and what you're doing there for your community.
We appreciate
All
it.
right.
Thank you.
Thank
I know
you.
you guys are pretty busy over there, I know. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All righty. And all right, we're going to go on to the next item on the agenda, the MOU between the district and CSEA. Is that Tammy? Is that Dr. Calzadias? Is that you?
That is me, thank
All
you.
right.
Due to our school closures, the reclassification cycle with our classified bargaining unit was to be completed by April the 1st, but that did not happen. So it's recommended that the board approve the MOU between the district and California School Employee Association and its Los Banos chapter number 92 to postpone the reclass cycle for this school year due to the school closures and within 45 days of the school's reopening and normal operations, presuming we will hold the reclass panel. We did have one application, and if that reclass were to be granted for that one individual resulting in compensation of any kind, it would be retroactive back to July 1. Which if the reclassification had been held during this cycle, it would have been July 1 as well. And so it's recommended that the board approve the MOU to postpone the reclass cycle for this school year.
Are there any questions? Seeing no questions, anybody want to make a motion?
I'll
Make a
move
motion
it,
to move.
yeah.
I couldn't catch that. So who made the motion?
I'll make a motion.
Mark made the motion, second by
Marlene?
Marlene. All right, we have motion by Benton, seconded by Smith. It is a roll call, Tina.
Ms. Benton,
Yes.
Mr. Castro,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Munoz,
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez. Ms. Rodriguez,
Yes, I was muted.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
and Mr. Pereira.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, on to mandated policy changes. Dr. Marshall?
Okay, basically, I'm recommending that you declare your intent to adopt the mandated policies. You have them listed in terms of working remotely, in-district enrollment, attendance, student records, and distance learning. And they're operational in nature, so it doesn't meet a specific board goal.
All right, any questions? Seeing no questions, I need a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Munoz, seconded by,
Marlene.
who was that? Benton,
Margaret.
I think Benton's hand went up first. So we have motion by Munoz, seconded by Benton.
Okay.
All right, so it is a roll call vote. Tina?
Ms. Benton,
Yes.
Mr. Castro,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Munoz,
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
and Mr. Pereira.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, on to the award recommendation, the FOT bus area parking lot.
Yes.
Is that Amir?
Yeah, Mayor.
The FOD parking lot is really, really bad because of the heavy bus traffic. And moreover, we have a lot of foot traffic there. That means it could be a liability. So staff is asking for the approval of the lowest bidder to repair the parking lot.
What is the cost?
It's 90,000. There's one at 89,000 and ENS is 191,000. So we're going with the lowest bidder.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Amir, why such a discrepancy between the high and low?
We didn't look at the detail, and we were all surprised. So after the bid is done, I'll ask him why, because we used him for demo of the pool, and he was very reasonable. So I don't know what happened here. So,
Yeah, I was just surprised when I saw that. That's a big discrepancy between.
I'm
the two
guessing
numbers.
that they are more of a construction people, not kind of repairing the parking lot, things like that. Maybe that's not their business agenda. They're mostly a construction. So I'm thinking they're trying to get in this business, maybe. So.
All right. Cool.
Well,
Thank you.
maybe we need to do a little more research, on this bid process. Why there's such a big difference.
Or have multiple.
Cal Coding has been working for us for a couple of years, so they're reasonable. But ENS has never worked for us, and they're more of a construction person. I don't think they're more of they do repair of parking lots. So what I'm thinking is they're trying to get into this business, and because they're new, they probably miscalculated.
Well, we want to make sure we get a good job, and so we don't have somebody to come back.
No, Cal Code has been working with the school district for the last 5 years, so they have been doing a good job.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
Just looking at the nature of our finances, that's why I'm actually asking all those little details of how much and everything.
Right,
to
right.
make-
No, absolutely.
If we can have,
Because we were all surprised with 191,000 too. I mean, we were all taken aback.
Yeah.
How can that be that big of a difference? But what I'm guessing is this company is a construction company. I don't think they do parking lots.
All right.
is it essential that it's needed?
Yes.
I mean, of course, don't get me wrong, but
Is it a separate amount of money, a separate allocation of money?
Yes.
Parking lot?
Yes, we had it planned already at the beginning of the year. So.
okay.
So.
All right. Any other questions?
No.
Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the low bid from Cal Coding.
I'll second.
Oh.
All right. I got a motion by Martinez, seconded by
Lewis.
Lewis. Mr. Castro. All right. Tina, roll call?
Ms. Benton,
Yes.
Mr. Castro,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Munoz,
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
and Mr. Pereira.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, on to the next item, which is Department of Rehabilitation Transition Partnership Program. This was Yolanda Cork-Anthony's, our Director of Special Ed. And obviously she's not here with us tonight because that's not what we're doing. So who is taking that? Mark?
I got it.
Go ahead, John.
Okay. So the Department of Rehabilitation contract is for the Transition Partnership Program. And this is for students with disabilities in their junior and senior year that provides them with opportunities for post-secondary employment and or training and vocational skills. This is a program that is run by the Department of Rehabilitation. The cost is actually really, there's nothing for the district. It's a grant, or it's an award that the district receives that we are reimbursed for any costs by the Department of Rehabilitation and the federal government. And it's a three-year award.
I like the no cost part.
Yeah, that's the best.
Yeah, so that's over $300,000, isn't that right?
It provides a valuable service for students with disabilities to give them valuable vocational and other post-secondary training that they might otherwise not have. Transitions, as we know, from one school to another, from one grade level to another, are a big part of the students' individual educational plans, and especially the transition from high school to essentially the rest of their life is one of the major aims of preparation for the special education program. And so it's staff's recommendation that the board approve this item.
I'm really glad that we are able to offer these kind of services at the local level for these students and then get reimbursed. That's a great thing. So I like when that happens. Any other questions or concerns or inquiries? Motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
All right, I have Marg was first, so motion by Benton, seconded by Rodriguez. Tina, roll call.
Ms. Benton,
Yes.
Mr. Castro,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Munoz,
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez.
Yes.
Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith.
No. Oh.
Thank you. And Mr. Pereira.
Yes.
Oh.
No, we're all doing the right thing of hitting our mute buttons, and then it's like, oh, they're talking, they're calling my name. It's like, I gotta unmute myself real fast. All right, on to the consent calendar. Are there any pulls on our calendar tonight?
No, I don't have any right now.
All right, seeing no pulls, I would like a motion, please.
I'll make that a motion.
Marlene made the motion, even though she had her mute button off, she raised her hand. So we have a motion by Smith, seconded by Munoz. All right.
Okay.
Tina, roll call, please.
Ms. Benton,
Yes.
Mr. Castro,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Munoz,
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
and Mr. Pereira.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. All right, on to reporting out a closed session action, and that is Mark.
Expulsion case number 417686130. Pupil is expelled for the remainder of the 2019-20 school year. Pupil shall report to the Valley Community School or any other school which meets the requirements of the Education Code of the State of California.
All right, thank you. The motion was by Ms. Benton, seconded by Mr. Munoz. The vote was ayes. Benton, Castro, Martinez, Munoz, Rodriguez, Smith, and Pereira. There were no noes, no absence, and no non-votes. And that is our report of closed session action. Any board member have anything for discussion, information, or any future agenda items?
I do, Anthony.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to put together a core of people to review certain policies or pending policies or required policies for the future. Something to discuss and look at here down the road. So.
Okay, well, first of all, we can have this as a discussion item, but it can't be, you made a motion and we can't have it as a motion because it wasn't properly noticed. And which under this section, there isn't a way to properly notice it. So we can have a discussion and see if there's any interest in doing that. I have a concern, and that is we pay California School Boards Association to keep our policies current and accurate. They have a staff, and I know this from 20 years ago when I was a chapter leader, not that I know anything that as a board member, but I knew this as a chapter leader because I had to deal with it. A local teacher association president type thing. And so I know that 4 times a year that they update policies for almost every school district in the state of California. All of our policies, I believe, are up to date and current. I'm just really concerned that the amount of time and amount of staff time it would take to do this without really seeing a need or why we would have to do it. The other part of that is every single policy that we have is generated by Ed Code. And if you were to look at our policies, all of them state what part of the Ed Code directs that personal policy or that policy. So before anything can be put in policy, it has to have Ed Code that sustains it. So if we were to write something into, even if we were to change one word in a policy, or were to add a word or take a word away or add a sentence or delete a sentence, it would have to go to legal counsel to make sure that we are meeting the requirements of the Ed Code. Because any change from what is there could make us out of compliance with Ed Code. So to say that we can sit down and tinker with our policies, I think we're kind of getting into some dangerous areas. And so I don't think it's something we should be messing with. If you have a specific issue and you think it should be addressed, if there's a way to address it, we can. But I have a problem with just sitting down and forming a committee and using staff time to look through policies. And we have, policy manual is that thick. It would take forever to go through policies. And that's a lot of staff time and I personally, as a board member, I would not want to be on that committee because of just the amount of time that it would take to go through that. And quite frankly, I don't have the expertise and to sit down and go through it, take every policy. And if we have a question on it to research Ed Code to go with it, that's a lot of work. That's my personal opinion. And I need other people to chime in. How do you guys feel on this?
Yeah, Anthony, well, thanks for your opinion on how CSBA they do handle that. I'd at least like to open it up for discussion to see if any of the other board members have any concerns with a policy that they might feel that is not in place, or if a new policy needs to be birthed to address to certain matters or situations. I just feel that we need to, it'd be good for us to discuss that and take a look at that.
And I just asked if anybody had anything to add to that. So, or questions or concerns, or how are your feelings on that? So yeah, please, anybody request.
Right here. Right here, Anthony.
Yeah, Ray, Gary.
Yeah, hey, this is to Ray. Hey, Ray, is there a specific policy that you want to bring up, or a matter, or a couple of specific matters?
Well, I'd like to open it up during our discussion, if we can set something like that up. there's a couple of areas. One of them is the bullying. Another one is our dress code. And there's a third one that I'd like to look into, which as far as I'm concerned, we don't have a policy in place for. And that's the regulation of our flagpoles on our school sites.
Okay, then we would have to look into that, right? That's open for discussion.
Yeah.
And we can go from there.
Well,
Okay.
again, we'd have to have
A committee.
supporting ed code to make any changes to any of those policies. We just can't change the policies without ed code that supports any of those things. So, you know,
No,
and to say that we have, those are the only things that need to be looked at or whatever, I think we're looking at some maybe personal issues. So anyway, other board members, please chirp in.
The policies are online right now, right? They're all
That's
located
correct.
on the website. And the policies are updated by an outside source 3 times a year, I believe.
4 times a year.
4 times a year. So, I mean, if you're interested in a particular policy, it's going to have to fall under ed code, like the flagpole that you mentioned or the dress code. Those are all regulated by ed code. I don't think, can we change those policies?
We can change it, but then we might be out of compliance with ed code, and to be out of compliance with ed code could lead to some litigation toward the district at a later time. So, we have to be careful with whatever we do.
Okay.
I'm wondering about the expense at this time for all of that, looking into all of that and creating a lot of time for our staff, and that's going to cost us a lot of money. That's my concern. And could you look up the ed code yourself online and see what the policies are? Ray?
Yeah, well, I'll just use one example. Let's talk about flagpole regulations. I couldn't find one, and I've asked with the district, I've asked around, and as far as I know, there isn't one that exists. And so that's, one area. So,
But see, that's a problem, because if it isn't supporting ed code for that, we can't just make a policy, and then if we ever get challenged on it, we have no grounds to stand on because there isn't any ed code that supports the policy. So that's a real problem. And I'm not sure we want to get into, legal litigation on things that
well, I'd like
probably
to
should
look
have stepped
into it
into.
and, just open it up for discussion amongst us.
Well, that we're in discussing session, so
There's a need, so I feel that
Let's hear
there's a need, and we should look into it and pursue it. And, it's something that I think is important, and we had an issue, I think it was last year, where there was questions that were being raised regarding a policy regarding our flagpoles, and when I raised the question, nobody could find one. But
I
something's
guess
right here, we should have a policy.
I guess what the concern is, my opinion, Ray, is that the concept of adding or taking or changing anything, you have to have facts that support whatever needs to be changed. So there's a lot of ideas that everybody has, but if we don't have the facts, we don't have documentations, we don't have the legal, it has to be supported by facts, and also by, it's a liability issue. In other words, it's a liability issue, and it has to be supported not just by thought, it has to have documentations to back it up. If there's no polls, then at that point, then it has to go beyond us. It has to go through legal counsel, it has to go through different things. And that's what I think they're talking about, having those expenses that we cannot incur at this point. I just question parking, because of the expense issue. So I think you have a good concept. It's just the fact that whatever we think, we can discuss, but that doesn't mean that we have the facts to back it up. or at this point, to spend money on something like you say the pool, and it's true. You mentioned the pools, but there's nothing in ed code. There's nothing in ed code that can support that. And if there's nothing in ed code, automatically it wouldn't be our decision. It would have to go to legal counsel to see if then at that point, then something can be implemented. And having it cannot be out of our expenses because we represent the district, we don't represent ourselves. Therefore, the expense has to come out of the district. And that's where I think everybody's at, that I don't think we're at that point to get that money to try to spend for something that right now it's not a priority. I think.
And also, isn't this the issue that came up with the flagpole with that certain group that wanted to hang their flag on the pole?
Yeah, there was, it created a lot of confusion, and it created a rift there amongst the students, and you know, I don't want to see that happen again. And so when I inquired about it, an existing policy regulating our flagpoles, I was given the answer that one doesn't exist.
Yeah, but you know, we have that group.
We should have one.
They are an organized group on campus, and it would almost be, if you forbid them from doing something like that, could that be discrimination?
That's why you want to go to legal counsel to be able to determine that. We can't determine anything.
And we also, as a board, approved all of the clubs on campuses, and we approved the club in question. We approved that as a board club, so it is a board sanctioned club at the site. So how are we going to say that we sanctioned that club existing and then say, no, well, you can't do something as simple as putting a flag on a flagpole? I don't know. I think there's some legal problems that we may run into here, especially if we don't have any ed code that backs it. Dr. Marshall, we haven't heard from you. Are we all in the? I mean, I've talked a lot. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm pulling stuff from my background, but maybe I'm wrong in my observation of this.
Well, I do think that we have to make sure with any kind of policies that we come up with, they have to be legal, and that's a big thing. I mean, because it has to be linked to ed code. I mean, so we're absolutely correct about that. You know, and I'm getting messages right now, from text from people saying that this is about the laws and stuff like that. We can kind of find ourselves in trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
That's kind of just now. But someone just texted me a couple of seconds ago about a court case that just happened in a neighboring district.
It's something that I feel that we need to look into, just to avoid future incidents. So.
All right. So to establish this committee, we would have to have it agendized, and so that would be on our next agenda, which would be in June. So if that's, then we can also continue with the discussion and to either form the committee or not. To do so, our requirements to do that is that it takes 4 members of the board to put an item on the agenda. So to agendize this discussion, I would need votes from, and this is obviously not a vote, but a yay or nay, whether you want to continue with this and place it on next month's agenda from at least 4 of the board members. So let me just quickly go through and ask you your position and how you feel we should continue with this. And so we'll start here on my screen. Stick you right in order on my screen. Marlene?
Nay.
You don't think we should do it? All right. Anahi?
Yes.
You think we should?
You need 4 points. Also, there's.
Well, but I mean, we need 4 to put it on the agenda. If we don't have 4, we don't put it on the agenda. So,
Right,
so
which is true, which mathematically that only makes sense.
okay. So okay. We have Marlene say no. Anahi says yes. Gary?
No.
No. Ray?
Yes.
And Lewis? Mike, mute on?
His mic's off.
Unmute. Louis? Wait a minute, one more time. Hang on. Louis, are you there? Oh, I can't unmute you. There you go.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem.
That's a no.
No? Okay. Mark?
No.
No. And I am also a no. Okay, so we only had two members who think we should put it on the next agenda. We had 5 who said that we should not. So it is not going to go on the next agenda. All right, is there anything else for discussion or future agenda or anything we need to discuss continuing on? Dr. Marshall?
Yeah, I do want to let y'all know that we've been with the COVID-19, our committees haven't been meeting. Our existing committees, like the finance committee, the 2x3, all those committees that we have. And we need to get some, start scheduling some meetings with those groups.
Okay.
Via Zoom or something like that. We have this business we need to attend to, and there's a lot going on. So we need to get those going. So
let us know what needs to happen.
That's all I have.
All right. Anything else? So the next item on the agenda is closed session, but we finished everything in closed session, and that we had a closed session meeting prior to this board meeting. So we took care of everything in closed session earlier today. And so the next item on the agenda is adjournment. Everybody stay safe, stay healthy, wash your hands, and I hope next time I see all of you on the screen here, I hope you're all still safe and healthy. And thank you everybody out in TV land for joining us, or YouTube land. And again, good night, everybody, and thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye. How do you do this?